We guessed that she was about 10 or 11 years old. She was malnourished, frightened, angry, depressed, and covered with lice. I was as busy as I'd ever been, looking after the children, seeing social workers, and setting up elaborate Braille and special educational programs for Tam, who had never been to school. Now I only saw Woody when he came to visit Dylan and Satchel for 1 supervised hour most weekdays. Occasionally he persuaded me to go out to dinner with him, but invariably I left the table in tears. Sasha's wife, Carrie, recalled that when Woody came to the apartment, he was all over you. He brought flowers and kept saying, "I love you." We didn't know whether to hit him or how to protect you. Sasha and I asked what you wanted, and you looked so confused you said you didn't know. What would have happened if I hadn't found the pictures of Suni? I asked Woody one day. Nothing, he replied. I thought this would be just a pleasant little footnote in Suni's history. But her analyst told me, unfortunately, Mr. Allen has crushed the fragile relationship you had built with Suni. Now I understood the reason for the dramatic change in her attitude the previous year, the new little laugh of superiority, the smugness, and the coldness to the other kids. I didn't know how we would ever repair things, and this thought broke my heart. A counselor for one of the teenage kids advised me that even Woody's brief appearances in our apartment were having a disturbing effect, that both Woody and Suni had been sexualized in the minds of probably all the children. The home has to be viewed as a safe place, she said, and the child she was counseling felt unsafe when Woody was present. I was advised that if I wanted to see him, I should do it outside the apartment without telling the kids. By early spring, Woody was no longer saying how sorry he was, or that he couldn't live without me, or that he was the most trustworthy person on earth. Now he was saying, if we don't get back together, then I'm free to date Suni or anybody I want. How are the kids supposed to live with that? I asked him. I pointed out that psychologically this was incest. What are they going to do at PTA meetings, introduce Suni as their sister and stepmother? How do you think, practically speaking, everybody would handle it? This is crazy. I can't be your mother-in-law. Despite everything that had happened, all the agony and all his years of therapy, the moral dimensions of the situation still utterly eluded him. We had been over it, and still he didn't get it, even though he was now seeing 2 therapists and sometimes had appointments twice a day, including Sunday. When Woody's psychiatrist was unhelpful, I went to Dr. Willard Gayland, a noted ethicist who was sympathetic but didn't have time to take Woody on as a full-time patient. Then I went to a brilliant Jesuit priest who agreed to talk to him, but Woody refused. By late spring, when Woody called or came to see the children, he was tough and entirely unrepentant. If I got angry or cried, he threatened to put me in a mental hospital and have the children taken away. In the foyer of our apartment one day, I was trying to push him out, saying, "Get out, please, please go," as some of the kids gathered around, Fletcher, Moses, Dylan, Tam, and Satchel. "I'm going to take these kids out of here," Woody was saying loudly over and over. Suddenly, Fletcher was coming at him, saying, "Get out now. Get out and leave Mom alone." Woody fled. About that time, Moses handed a letter to Woody. "You can't force me to live with you. All you want is the trust and relationships you had in the beginning of the time. You can't have those worthy things because you have done a horrible, unforgivable, needy, ugly, stupid thing, which I hope you will not forgive yourself for doing. I hope you get so humiliated that you commit suicide. You brought these things to yourself. We didn't do anything wrong. Everyone knows you're not supposed to have an affair with your son's sister, including that sister, but you have a special way to get that sister to think that it's okay. Unfortunately, Suni hadn't had a serious relationship before and probably thought, okay, this is a great chance to see what a serious relationship is like. That's probably why she did it. I just want you to know that I don't consider you my father anymore. It was a great feeling having a father, but you smashed that feeling and dream with a single act. I hope you are proud to crush your son's dream." Although Moses had refused to see him after January 13th, Woody continued to visit with Dylan and Satchel, supervised. I did not allow him to take them to his apartment. In April, Dylan's therapist, Dr. Schultz, informed me that Dylan had to be told what was going on, that the little girl, now nearly 7 years old, had seen me crying and overheard me on the phone with Woody and heard Suni saying she wanted to die, and Woody endlessly arguing with me. And although I'd asked the older children not to discuss the matter within earshot of the younger ones, obviously they were too upset and needed to talk. When the little kids were supposed to be asleep, we had found them listening outside closed doors. Dr. Schultz said she had been trying to convince Mr. Allen for some time that it was necessary to tell Dylan, but he had opposed it vehemently. He wanted the little girl to be told that somehow I had misinterpreted a joke between him and Suni, but the therapist was adamant that that would not suffice, given the very real distress in the family. So I was instructed to explain it to Dylan in the doctor's presence and told precisely what words to use. I would have preferred to cut off my legs. Dr. Schultz and I were both looking at Dylan as she played on the floor near the fireplace. I took a deep breath. Dylan, I know you've noticed that sometimes Mommy has been crying. Mommy has been sad, and Suni was crying, and now she hasn't been coming home, and Mommy seems upset with Daddy, and Daddy gets upset, and now I guess you need to know what's been going on. Well, Daddy became sort of like a boyfriend to Suni. And that was wrong, because daddies are supposed to be daddies. But he is sorry, and he is getting help, and we promise you it will never happen again. Dylan was moving 2 little dolls around on the floor. She never looked up. I hugged her. After a few minutes of nobody saying anything, Dr. Schultz asked me to leave them alone together. Suni didn't come home anymore, and she didn't call me. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't ready to have her back. When, in early May, I asked her for reassurance that she would have no contact with Woody, she said, "Stop asking me for things," and hung up the phone. Her brothers and sisters, every single one of them from Moses on up, got on the phone, and although they were angry and disgusted, we all said we missed her and we loved her. We needed to hear her say, "Look, I've made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused, and it isn't going to happen anymore." We needed that, but we couldn't get it. Summer arrived, and the children and I went to Frog Hollow. When Woody came to visit Dylan and Satchel once a week, the older kids left the house to stay with friends. It was hard for us to have him there. Woody and I had already agreed to a legal settlement, scheduled to be signed on August 6th, defining our rights and responsibilities with regard to the children. Most important, it ensured that his contact with the children would be supervised, and it did not entitle him to spend the night at our home. I was eager for that date to arrive because, despite the obvious distress his visits were causing to my family and my repeated requests that he sleep elsewhere, he insisted on staying at Frog Hollow. Just then I didn't press the point further because I feared he would try to have that privilege written into the settlement contract. That summer I taught Tam and Dylan to swim and Satchel to read. Baby Isaiah, a sweet-natured and beautiful little boy, was already smiling and growing so fast I had to move him from his bassinet to the antique crib beside my bed. As usual, I videotaped all the children's accomplishments. Throughout this time, Tam was an inspiration. Although she had lost everything, her parents, home, country, language, friends, and her sight, still, with doubts and difficulties, she was able to open up to each member of the family, one by one. I have never respected anyone more than Tam. She helped to restore my perspective and taught me about surviving with grace and without bitterness. I reconnected with my old friends, and slowly, piece by piece, I began to reclaim myself, the identity that had somehow, over the years, slipped almost out of existence. That same essential self who emerged from the polio wards, strong and determined, awakened from a long, deep slumber. Now, when Woody came to Frog Hollow for visitations, Dylan would get headaches and stomach aches. She curled up in the hammock or lay in her bed under her quilt with the door closed. On 3 occasions during his visits, she locked herself in the bathroom, once for 4 hours. When he arrived for his visits, I usually took Tam, Moses, and Isaiah out, often with Casey. I had a trustworthy babysitter, Christy, and that summer we also had Sophie, a French tutor for the children. I told them both never to leave Woody alone with Dylan. He promised me that under no circumstances would he ever be alone with either Satchel or Dylan. But in the dark of the early mornings, even though I forbade it, he would creep upstairs from the guest room to lie on the floor beside Dylan's bed. A couple of times when Tam, who shared the room with Dylan, got up to go to the bathroom, she stepped on Woody and woke up the whole house with her screams. Tam hated Woody. Undoubtedly she had overheard negative comments from the older kids, and through my letters that had been read to her, she knew vaguely that an older sister, a sister she had met only once, but who had been described to her at length in my letters, had disappeared under ominous circumstances related to Woody. And perhaps she had heard me crying in my room at night, or whenever Woody phoned. But primarily she disliked him because he never, ever spoke to her. And since she couldn't see, it frightened her the way he would suddenly be in the room, near her, telling Satchel to pull her hair, and always with bags full of presents for Dylan and Satchel, and nothing, not a word, for Tam. With an escalating intensity, Woody tried to persuade me to give him the Polaroids of Suni. "Let's burn them together," he said. But I told them they would stay in the vault for the rest of my life. I would never take them out, but I wouldn't destroy them either. I was sure that if I did, he would deny they ever existed. I had persuaded Suni to take a job I had found for her as a counselor at a summer camp in Maine. In July, I received a letter from the camp's director saying Suni had been fired because the scores of phone calls from a Mr. Simon had prevented her from becoming involved with the activities. She had left the camp, but I didn't know where she was. Woody finally admitted that he was Mr. Simon, but denied knowing where Suni was or even her phone number. "Andre and I wanted to get her away from all this. We hoped she'd make connections with kids her own age," I told him. "Now you've ruined that." "Leave her alone," I implored. "Out of respect for our 12 years together, or for me as the mother of your child, or for those of my children you claim to love, out of respect for Suni and her relationship with me, her mother, I am begging you. Leave her be. Let her come home to her family. Let her have a life she can be proud of." "Well, I'd like to do this for you," he said. "I will promise to leave Suni alone if you will give me the pictures, or we can burn them together if you like." But I did not, would not, give them to him. By the end of July, Woody's people were trying to dispel the persistent rumbles in the press that we were splitting up and that it had something to do with one of my daughters. He asked me to issue a joint press release saying there was nothing to the rumors, that everything was fine, and that we were looking forward to beginning our 14th film in September. "We have to stand together on this," he told me. I said I wouldn't say anything, period, but I wasn't going to lie about it. "Then I'm going to defend myself," he said. "I'm not just going to stand there and let myself get crucified." I told him his position was indefensible. He'd had sex with one of my kids and taken pornographic pictures of her. That was the truth, and what else could he say? "You'll find out, and you're not going to like it," he warned. "I'll say that Suni and I love each other," he said. "If it gets out, my analyst says I have to defend myself, so be prepared. Now, if you want to join me in a joint statement where we deny it, that's another thing." "I never talk to the press," I said. "They know that. I'll just keep quiet." "But I'm telling you, the thing is now looming in the newspapers. If you can't see your way to helping me out of this, then I'm going to defend myself. I think we should issue some kind of statement saying that this is ridiculous and that we're doing a movie together in a few weeks. Then we do the movie and we put this thing behind us. If that can be done, there's no limit to what we can have together." "I don't feel very safe with you." On August 4th, when Woody came to Frog Hollow for his specified visit, I was out shopping with Casey, Tam, and Isaiah. Christy, Sophie, Casey's 3 children, and her babysitter Allison were at the house with Dylan and Satchel. Moses was off by himself taking a walk. After a couple of hours, Casey and I returned, and the children rushed to greet us. It was momentarily jarring when Sophie pointed out that Dylan had no underpants on under her sundress, since, at 7, she was extremely modest. I asked Christy to please put some underpants on Dylan.